Today, we're getting into a really captivating historical mystery. Think whispers of buried treasure, legends that just won't quit, and a big change to Florida's coastline. We're focusing on a pretty key figure who actually gave his name to a famous landmark. John's Pass. Yeah, John Levique. But see, even his name is a bit of a puzzle. Was it John Lavash? Juan Lavash.
Yeah.
Jean Levique. Our sources, well, they show a man with a lot of names and honestly even more conflicting stories about who he was and where he came from. We pulled together some interesting stuff for this deep dive. We've got a St. Pete Wiki article, some early historical records, and even an old newspaper clipping that plays a surprisingly big role in the legend. So our mission today is to kind of unpack the layers here, the facts, the folklore, and maybe some clever marketing that shaped the story around this guy in the past named after him. Okay, let's dive in. So right off the bat, the sources clash. Was John Levique French or Spanish? Seems like a basic question, but
it really is. And it's a kind of a point of contention in the records, but you hear the name phonetically, Levique, and it does sort of lean French, doesn't it?
It does.
What's fascinating, though, is how quickly even these historical accounts differ on just basic facts. You have Carl Grismer, who did early research on land holdings, and he was adamant, absolutely claimed Levique was Spanish from St. Augustine. But then other references, even some digging on Ancestry.com, they point pretty strongly towards French heritage, linking the name to Levique, which means bishop in French.
Right. So despite Grismer's view, the sort of general consensus and just the sound of the name seems to lean French. And it's probably worth mentioning, too, he was illiterate. Signed documents with an X.
Exactly. And that detail alone just opens the door for all sorts of variations in how his name got written down over the years. Makes perfect sense.
So, okay, putting aside the name mystery for a second, what do we actually know about him as a settler? What are the hard facts?
Well, we have solid documentation. He established a homestead, 160 acres on Boca Ciega Bay. It was really close to where Abercrombie Park is today. His name is clearly there on the early landholding maps, so he was definitely a presence, an early one. In fact, he was one of the first 3 property owners to get land grants on the Pinellas Peninsula, right alongside Joseph Silva and Maximo Hernandez. So that really places him among the true pioneers of the area.
Okay, now this next bit about his land grant, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. He gets the official government patent, right, for 157 acres, August 1st, 1849. But then our sources show that after the Civil War, he actually signed over that whole piece of land to settle a grocery bill, a $46 grocery bill.
Yeah. To John Miller and William B. Henderson of Tampa, it sounds kind of shocking today, doesn't it? 157 acres for $46 worth of groceries.
It really does. I mean, what does that tell us? Was land just not worth much then, or was $46 a fortune?
Well, it's a great question because it really speaks volumes about that early economy. I mean, yes, 157 acres is huge now, but back then, undeveloped frontier land, its market value was pretty low. And $46 for groceries back then, that would have been a substantial amount, maybe supplies for a long time, or for his turtle farming business, perhaps.
Okay.
It just highlights how, immediate needs and actual cash could sometimes outweigh the sort of long-term theoretical value of land, especially navigating that post-Civil War economy. It wasn't totally uncommon for land to change hands to settle debts, but yeah, the grocery bill detail is certainly memorable.
Definitely makes you wonder what was on that list. Okay, so we've got Levique the settler, documented facts, but like we hinted, there's this whole other story, much more dramatic, the legend of John Levique, the pirate.
Right, the swashbuckling version.
Exactly. So the story goes something like this. John Levique, slightly different spelling again, but same guy, supposedly was a French peasant kid, a cabin boy on a Spanish ship around 1836. Ship gets ambushed by pirates. He's given the choice. Join us or die. So, naturally.
He joins the pirates. Classic.
He joins. Works his way up, becomes captain. But the story adds this little twist. He supposedly didn't like killing or ransoming people.
Less profitable, I imagine.
Apparently. So he ended up with less treasure than other pirates, but he did scrape together a small chest of gold, which of course he buried, on an island somewhere off Florida's west coast. And after all that adventure, he supposedly retires from piracy to become, wait for it, a simple turtle farmer, right near his buried treasure naturally.
Listening to that, it sounds incredibly familiar, doesn't it? It's almost got echoes of, popular adventure stories. It reminds me a bit of the backstory in The Princess Bride.
That's a great point. Dread Pirate Roberts, maybe.
Maybe. Does that kind of suggest these pirate tales were maybe less about strict history and more about crafting a really good story, even way back then?
I think that's exactly what our sources start pointing towards. And here's the kicker in Levique's treasure story. He allegedly buried $800 in gold coins, not on some island, but right at his homestead in 1848. Then he heads off, supposedly to New Orleans or maybe Key West. Accounts differ on business.
Okay.
And while he's gone, bam, the huge hurricane of 1848 hits. The thrill-a-minute hurricane, as one source calls it.
Oh, wow. So he missed it.
He missed the storm itself, yeah.
Yeah.
But the storm didn't miss his treasure spot. It carved out John's pass, right where the gold was supposedly buried.
So the landscape literally changed underneath him, or where his treasure was. Yeah, that gale was massive. It completely reshaped the coastline there, made it basically impossible for him to find the spot again, assuming the story's true. But the sort of silver lining, historically speaking, is that the new pass got named after him, John's Pass. Solidified his name on the map anyway.
Right. So, okay, we have this dramatic pirate story, buried gold, a hurricane. What's the actual historical reality here? The sources get pretty skeptical. There's this St. Pete Times article, September 1914. It claims the gold was well hid but close by. And get this, it was vouched for by a reliable man.
Oof. Yeah. As soon as you hear a reliable man, your historian senses start tingling.
Exactly.
It's such a classic trope in folklore or, sensationalized news. It's basically saying, we don't have proof, but trust us, someone trustworthy said so. Real historical accounts usually want name sources, not vague assurances.
Exactly. And that same 1914 article gives this really specific kind of tantalizing detail. This shell pile where the gold supposedly was, just 100 feet roughly from the end of the jungle car line, the old trolley stop.
Okay, now that's interesting. The timing and the location. This raises a really important question. Who benefits from telling the story right then, there? Because, well, it turns out that in 1914, you had a Mr. Girard running a fishing and bait shop right there at the end of the car line, doing good business. And, maybe more significantly, a real estate developer named Walter Fuller was actively selling lots in his brand new jungle subdivision right in that same area.
Okay, so the picture becomes a lot clearer. The implication is this whole treasure story might have been, well, a marketing gimmick.
Looks that way, doesn't it?
Get people excited, draw them out to the end of the line, come ride the trolley, maybe find some pirate gold.
Exactly. And hey, while you're out here, need some bait. Maybe rent a shovel. Or, if you don't find the gold, how about this lovely waterfront lot?
Makes perfect sense. Sell the dream, and if not the dream, sell the supplies or the land.
Precisely. And, that same article also describes Levique as a giant Frenchman. Another little detail that sounds maybe a bit too good to be true.
Like another embellishment to make the legend bigger.
Yeah, just adds to the mystique, makes him larger than life. Highly unlikely to be historically accurate, but great for a story.
So the conclusion our sources seem to draw is that the whole pirate buried treasure thing just became folklore. It got bigger over time, probably driven by that same motive back in 1914, sell stuff to visitors.
Right. And that motive continues right up to today. Places like the Johns Pass Village Boardwalk, the legend helps bring people in. It's less history, more enduring marketing.
Okay, so let's circle back then. What can we confidently pin down about John Leviche's actual life dates?
Well, we have John Bethel's account. He was another early pioneer and historian down there. He puts Leviche arriving in Pinellas around 1846, so that would be after Antonio Maximo, who got there in 43, and William Bunce in 45. He's still very early, but maybe not the absolute first.
Okay, 1846 arrival.
And we know he got that official land grant in 1849. That's documented. The timing being after the 1848 hurricane suggests that whatever improvements he needed to make to the land to qualify for the grant, those were checked after the storm.
Got it. And his death.
That's still murky. There's an unattributed article floating around that suggests maybe 1873, but it's not confirmed. And kind of strangely, despite having a whole pass named after him, his grave has never been found. Supposedly, it's unmarked, somewhere near his old homestead.
Wow. So, okay, wrapping this up. What's the bottom line on John Leviche? What can we say for sure?
Well, he was definitely real. He was a settler, very likely French, despite some debate. He was a turtle farmer, probably operated a fishery, traded up and down the Gulf Coast. That much seems solid.
And his biggest legacy.
His biggest mark, no question, is John's Pass being named after him when it formed in 48. And possibly Pass-a-Grille, too. Some accounts link that name to him as well, showing how tied he was to that changing coastline.
So really, what we've looked at today is this fascinating case of a real person whose actual life story got tangled up, almost completely overshadowed by these tall tales and folklore. It's a great example of how history isn't just facts, right? It gets shaped and embellished, sometimes completely reinvented by our own desire for excitement, for mystery, and sometimes, yeah, for profit.
Absolutely. And while the really specific personal details about Levish himself are pretty scarce, maybe even contradictory, his story, the legend, tells us a lot about the power of local myths, how they grow and change over time to mean different things to different people.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So maybe something for you to think about. Next time you hear a local legend, especially if it's tied to a place, a landmark, maybe even a business, think about not just what supposedly happened, but why that particular story might have stuck around. And maybe who benefits from keeping it alive.